All right, let's dive into dynamic pricing in e-commerce.
Sounds good.
We've got this super interesting article from Devhooks, and I think it's going to be a real eye-opener.
I think so too. It's a fascinating topic.
Dynamic pricing is like having a super-powered pricing team that's always working, you know, like 24/7, never sleeps, powered by AI.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about using data to make those pricing decisions, and AI is really the key to unlocking that potential.
It makes you wonder how companies like, well, Amazon,
Mm.
how do they manage to stay ahead of the curve?
Well, that's a great example. We'll definitely get into how Amazon uses dynamic pricing to its advantage.
Awesome. I'm excited to dig into that.
Me too. But before we get into the specifics, I think it's important to understand why dynamic pricing is such a big deal right now.
Yeah, okay, I'm all ears.
It's practically essential for businesses to stay competitive in e-commerce these days.
I mean, I can see that. The online world is constantly changing, right?
Exactly. And with so much competition, businesses need to find ways to optimize their pricing strategies and stay ahead of the game.
So dynamic pricing is like their secret weapon.
You could say that. It gives them the flexibility to adjust prices in real time based on all sorts of factors like demand, inventory levels, competitor pricing, you name it.
Okay, so walk me through it. How does this whole thing actually work? I mean, is it just random or is there like a method to the madness?
Well, there's definitely a method to it. Think of it like a complex system that's constantly monitoring the market and making adjustments. It's like a super sophisticated algorithm that takes into account a ton of data points.
Okay, now you're losing me a bit. Algorithms, data points. Break it down for me.
Okay, imagine this. The system is looking at how many people want a product, checking how much is left in stock, even peeking at what competitors are charging.
So it's like keeping tabs on everything that's going on 24/7.
Exactly. And then you have those, those special events that can really throw a wrench in the works, like a sudden holiday rush or a flash sale.
Oh yeah, totally. Those can be crazy.
Right. So all of these things and more factor into how those prices change.
Okay, so it's not random. There's a method to this madness. But where does the AI come in? What's its role in all of this?
AI is essentially what makes sense of all of that data we've been talking about. It's like the brain of the operation.
So it's like the mastermind behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Exactly. AI, and specifically machine learning, allow these systems to analyze massive amounts of data and make lightning-fast decisions about pricing.
Okay, so it's not just humans sitting there crunching numbers all day.
Not anymore. AI can do that much faster and more efficiently, freeing up humans to focus on other tasks.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm starting to see the power of this. So what can AI actually do when it comes to dynamic pricing? Like, give me some specifics.
It can do a ton. For example, AI can use algorithms like regression analysis and decision trees to figure out the optimal price point for a product. It can also automatically update prices across all sorts of platforms, even down to the level of personalized pricing for different customer segments.
Whoa, personalized pricing. That sounds a little bit creepy, honestly. Like, how does that even work?
Yeah, it's actually pretty fascinating. AI can look at things like a customer's past behavior, what they tend to buy, how much they're willing to spend, maybe even their browsing history, and then adjust the price accordingly.
So it's like showing different prices to different people based on their past purchases or something.
You got it. AI is getting incredibly sophisticated at tailoring pricing to individual customers.
I mean, I guess I could see the business sense in that, but it also feels a little bit, I don't know, sneaky.
Yeah, it's definitely important for companies to be upfront with customers about how personalized pricing works and to make sure they're not being taken advantage of.
Transparency is key, right? Nobody wants to feel like they're being tricked.
Absolutely. But let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Why are companies so obsessed with dynamic pricing? What's the real benefit for them?
I mean, I guess it makes sense for businesses to want to make as much money as possible, right?
Of course. And dynamic pricing is a powerful tool for maximizing revenue. By tweaking prices on the fly, companies can squeeze out every bit of profit from their products.
So it's all about optimizing those profit margins. Makes sense.
Exactly. But it's not just about maximizing profits. Dynamic pricing can also help businesses optimize their inventory, respond to changes in demand more effectively, and even gain a competitive edge.
Okay, so it's like a win-win-win.
You could say that. When done right, dynamic pricing can offer significant benefits for businesses.
It almost sounds too good to be true. Are there any downsides or risks that companies should be aware of?
Well, there are always risks, right? Nothing is perfect. And one of the biggest risks with dynamic pricing is becoming too reliant on those algorithms. AI is powerful, but it's not infallible.
So it's not just a matter of setting it and forgetting it.
Definitely not. Businesses need to be actively involved in monitoring their dynamic pricing strategies and making sure the algorithms are working as intended.
Right, so it's not just set it and forget it. You need a human touch to make sure things don't go haywire.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance between automation and human oversight.
Okay, so it's a delicate dance. Got it. But what about real-world examples of companies using dynamic pricing effectively? I'm curious to see how this actually plays out in practice.
Oh, there are tons of great examples out there. Amazon, of course, is the classic case study. They're the masters of dynamic pricing.
Oh, yeah, I bet they are. I feel like their prices are always changing.
You're not wrong. They're constantly adjusting prices based on all sorts of factors. It's one of the key reasons they've been so successful.
So Amazon's really using the full arsenal of dynamic pricing tactics. What other examples come to mind?
Well, airlines are another prime example. You've probably noticed that the price of a plane ticket can change dramatically depending on when you book, how many seats are left, and even the demand for that particular route.
That makes sense. It's all about filling those seats and maximizing profits for each flight.
Exactly. They've been using dynamic pricing for years to optimize their revenue.
So it's not just a newfangled e-commerce thing.
Not at all. It's been around for a while, but it's becoming increasingly sophisticated and widespread with the rise of AI and big data.
That makes sense. What other industries are using it?
Oh, tons. Don't forget about ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft. Those prices are all over the place, changing based on demand, traffic, even the weather.
That's so true. I've definitely noticed those price surges during rush hour or bad weather. It can be frustrating sometimes, but I guess it makes sense from a business perspective.
Right. They're using dynamic pricing to balance supply and demand and make sure there are enough drivers available when and where they're needed most.
Okay, so it's all about finding that sweet spot. Got it. But it's not just big companies, right? Can smaller businesses get in on the action too? I mean, is it only for the Amazons and Ubers of the world?
Absolutely not. Dynamic pricing is for everyone. There are plenty of tools and platforms out there that make it accessible to businesses of all sizes.
That's good to know. So it's not just a big company game anymore.
Exactly. Any business that sells products online can potentially benefit from dynamic pricing. The key is to start small, maybe focus on a few key products, and gradually scale up as you get the hang of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Start small, test it out, see what works. I like that approach. Now I'm curious about the difference between dynamic pricing and fixed pricing.
Ah, good question. They're fundamentally different approaches to pricing.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's the difference? Like, what are the pros and cons of each?
Well, fixed pricing is pretty straightforward. You set a price for a product, and it stays the same no matter what.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. Easy to understand.
Exactly. It's simple, predictable, and customers generally like it because they know what to expect. But it can be limiting, especially in a fast-paced market where things are constantly changing.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem. You need to be able to adapt, right?
Right. Dynamic pricing, on the other hand, allows you to be much more flexible and responsive to changes in the market. You can adjust prices on the fly based on all sorts of factors.
So it's all about finding the right approach for your specific business and your target market.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to pricing. You need to figure out what works best for you.
Now, the article mentions that dynamic pricing is especially powerful during seasonal events, which makes
Right.
sense, right?
Mhm.
Think about like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all those crazy shopping days.
You're exactly right. Those are prime times for dynamic pricing. Demand for certain products skyrockets during those periods, and dynamic pricing allows businesses to adjust their prices accordingly, capturing a larger share of that holiday spending.
So it's like a secret weapon for those crazy shopping days. You can really make a killing if you do it right.
You could say that. It's all about optimizing your pricing strategies to make the most of those peak shopping periods. And that's where dynamic pricing really shines.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? It really makes you think about the whole shopping experience in a new way. But what about the future of dynamic pricing? I mean, it seems like it's already pretty advanced, but where do we go from here?
That's a great question, and it's what makes this whole topic so exciting. The future of dynamic pricing is, well, incredibly exciting. I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
I'm intrigued. Give me a sneak peek into the future. What can we expect?
As AI and machine learning continue to evolve, we can expect even more sophisticated pricing models. Imagine hyper-personalized pricing, where you receive a price that's tailored specifically to you based on your past behavior, your preferences, your current context.
Oh, that's wild. It's like the pricing equivalent of having a personal shopper who knows exactly what you want and how much you're willing to pay.
You got it. That's the future of dynamic pricing. Hyper-personalization, real-time feedback loops, and even more sophisticated AI-powered algorithms.
This is all very exciting, but are there any potential downsides to these advancements? Could things go too far?
That's a valid concern. As with any powerful technology, there are always potential risks and ethical considerations. We need to make sure that dynamic pricing is used responsibly and doesn't become a tool for manipulation or discrimination.
So it's a balancing act, finding that sweet spot between innovation and responsible use. But I'm really intrigued by all of this. Let's dig into those ethical considerations a bit more. What are some of the key concerns people have raised about dynamic pricing?
Yeah, it's a really important conversation to have. One of the biggest concerns is that dynamic pricing could be used to discriminate against certain groups of customers.
That's a serious issue. How could that happen? Give me an example.
Well, let's say a company is using personal data like location or browsing history to charge higher prices to people who live in more affluent areas or who have shown a willingness to pay more in the past. That could be seen as a form of discrimination.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. It's not fair to charge people different prices based on factors like that.
Exactly. It's a slippery slope. And it's why it's so important for companies to be very careful about how they use dynamic pricing and to ensure that they're not using it in a way that's discriminatory or unethical.
So what are some ways that businesses can address these concerns and ensure that they're using dynamic pricing ethically? I mean, how can they make sure they're doing the right thing?
Well, transparency is absolutely crucial. Businesses need to be upfront with customers about how they're using dynamic pricing, what factors are influencing price changes, and what data they're using to personalize those prices.
So it's all about being open and honest with customers, giving them the information they need to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And it's not just about providing information, it's about giving customers control over their data and how it's used. Companies should allow customers to opt out of personalized pricing if they're not comfortable with it.
So it's about respecting customer privacy and giving them choices. I like that.
It's all about building trust and ensuring that dynamic pricing is used in a way that benefits both businesses and consumers.
Well said. It sounds like a lot of responsibility falls on businesses to use this technology in a fair and ethical way.
It definitely does, but it's also important for consumers to be aware of how dynamic pricing works and to be proactive in protecting their own interests.
So it's a two-way street. Consumers need to be informed, and businesses need to be responsible.
Exactly. Dynamic pricing is a powerful tool that can benefit everyone, but it's up to all of us to make sure it's used ethically and fairly.
Okay, so we've covered the ethical side of things. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are some practical tips for businesses that are considering implementing dynamic pricing? What do they need to know to make it work?
Great question. There are a few key things to keep in mind. First and foremost, you need to have a clear understanding of your business goals. What are you hoping to achieve with dynamic pricing? Are you trying to increase revenue, improve margins, optimize inventory, or something else?
That makes sense. It's all about having a plan. You need to know what you're trying to accomplish before you dive in.
Absolutely. And once you know your goals, you can start to develop a dynamic pricing strategy that aligns with those goals.
So it's not just about blindly implementing dynamic pricing. You need to think strategically about how it fits into your overall business plan.
Exactly. Another important consideration is your target market. Who are your customers? What are their price sensitivities? How do they typically shop?
Right, because you need to understand how your customers are going to react to these price changes.
Exactly. You need to make sure that your dynamic pricing strategy is aligned with their expectations and preferences. Otherwise, you risk alienating them.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and setting prices. It's about understanding your customers and how they'll respond to price changes.
You got it. And finally, it's important to remember that dynamic pricing is not a set-it-and-forget-it solution. It requires ongoing monitoring, analysis, and adjustment.
It sounds like a lot of work. I mean, is it really worth all that effort?
It can be, but the potential rewards are significant for businesses that can master the art of dynamic pricing.
Well, I'm starting to see the potential here, but I'm still wondering, how can businesses know if dynamic pricing is right for them? I mean, it seems like it could be a great tool, but it might not be for everyone, right?
That's a very insightful question. Not every business is a good fit for dynamic pricing. It really depends on your specific industry, your target market, your competitive landscape, and your overall business goals.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Definitely not. It's important to do your research and carefully consider all the factors before you jump in.
So it's a big decision, and it's not something to take lightly. But let's say a business has decided that dynamic pricing is right for them. What are some of the key things they need to keep in mind when implementing it?
Well, one of the most important things is to start small. Don't try to do too much too soon.
Baby steps, right?
Exactly. Maybe focus on a few key products or a specific category, and then gradually expand your dynamic pricing strategy as you gain more experience and confidence.
Okay, so start small, test the waters, see what works. That makes sense.
And don't forget about data. Data is the lifeblood of dynamic pricing. You need to have access to accurate, reliable data in order to make informed pricing decisions.
So it's all about tracking everything, analyzing the numbers, making adjustments based on what the data tells you.
Precisely. And be prepared to be flexible. The beauty of dynamic pricing is that it allows you to adapt to changing market conditions in real time, but that also means you need to be willing to make adjustments to your strategy on the fly.
So it's not a static thing. It's a constantly evolving process.
You got it. Dynamic pricing is all about staying agile and responsive to the ever-changing dynamics of the market.
That makes sense. Now, I want to touch on something we briefly mentioned earlier, personalized pricing. It's a fascinating concept, but it also raises some ethical concerns.
It definitely does. It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be used responsibly.
So how can businesses ensure they're using personalized pricing in a way that's fair and doesn't alienate customers?
Well, transparency is key, as we've discussed. Customers need to know that personalized pricing is happening, and they need to understand what factors are being used to determine those prices.
So no more hiding behind the curtain. Companies need to be upfront about what they're doing.
Exactly. And it's not just about being transparent. It's about giving customers control. Let them opt out of personalized pricing if they're not comfortable with it.
So it's all about respect and choice. Give customers the information they need and the power to make their own decisions.
Exactly. Personalized pricing can be a great tool for businesses, but it needs to be implemented thoughtfully and ethically.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground here today, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how consumers can navigate the world of dynamic pricing effectively.
That's a great question. It's a new world out there for consumers, and it can be confusing and frustrating at times.
So what are your top tips for shoppers who want to make sure they're getting the best possible prices in this age of dynamic pricing?
Well, first and foremost, don't assume that the first price you see is the best price. Do your research, compare prices from different retailers, and be willing to shop around.
That's good advice for any shopper, really, but it's especially important with dynamic pricing, right?
Absolutely. Prices can fluctuate wildly, so it pays to be a savvy shopper and do your homework.
What other tips do you have?
Be flexible with your timing. If you're not in a rush to buy something, you might be able to save money by waiting for a sale or a price drop.
The art of patience. It's not always easy, but it can definitely pay off.
It definitely can. And don't be afraid to negotiate. Just because a price is displayed doesn't mean it's set in stone. You might be surprised at how often you can get a better deal by simply asking.
So it's all about being informed, being proactive, and being willing to advocate for yourself as a consumer.
Precisely. The more you understand about dynamic pricing, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this new landscape and find the best deals.
Well, I think that's some great advice. I'm feeling a lot more confident about tackling the world of dynamic pricing now, but I'm also realizing that it's a really complex topic with a lot of nuances.
It is, and it's constantly evolving. It's definitely a topic that we'll be talking about a lot more in the years to come.
I'm sure of it. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've explored the what, the why, and the how of dynamic pricing. We've talked about the benefits, the challenges, the ethical considerations, and the practical implications for both businesses and consumers.
We've definitely covered a lot. It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, something to really chew on.
Please do. I'm all ears. Yeah. And it's really going to change how we shop, I think. Like, imagine walking into a store and
every price tag is like digital.
yeah, and they're changing constantly.
Yeah.
Based on, who you are, what you're looking at. It's wild.
That is wild. Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff, the potential, but what about the not so good? Like, is everyone on board with dynamic pricing?
Not really. There are Some people, and I think rightfully so, who are a bit wary.
Okay, so what are the concerns? Why the hesitation?
I think the biggest worry is that dynamic pricing could be used, unfairly, that it could take advantage of people.
That's a good point. Like if it's not done right, it could feel very manipulative.
Exactly. And that's where businesses really need to, step up and make sure they're doing this ethically.
So what can they do? How can they make sure they're using dynamic pricing responsibly?
Well, first off, they got to be upfront with customers. No more hiding behind algorithms.
So full transparency.
Exactly. Explain how the prices are set, what factors go into those decisions, whether it's demand, inventory competition, or even the weather.
It's like pulling back the curtain and showing people how the magic trick works.
Yeah, exactly. Because when customers feel like they're in the dark, like prices are changing randomly, that's when the trust starts to erode.
And trust is everything, right?
Absolutely. So how do you communicate this effectively? How do you tell people, hey, we're using dynamic pricing, but don't worry, it's all good?
Right. How do you do that without scaring them off?
Well, you can start by explaining it clearly on your website, simple language, easy to understand.
Like an FAQ section or something.
Yeah, or maybe a dedicated page that explains how dynamic pricing works at your company.
Hmm.
And then you can use pop-ups or notifications to alert people when prices have changed and explain why.
So it's about proactive communication. Don't wait for people to ask. Just tell them up front.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get into the specifics. Explain the factors that are driving those price changes. If it's because demand is high, say that. If it's because a competitor just lowered their price, be transparent about that.
So honesty is the best policy.
Always, especially when it comes to pricing. And this brings us back to personalized pricing, which I know we touched on earlier.
Right. Personalized pricing. We said it could be a bit creepy.
Yeah, and I think it's worth unpacking that a bit more because it's such a thorny issue. It's powerful, no doubt, but it can also raise some real concerns about fairness and potential discrimination.
Yeah, exactly. So how can businesses make sure they're not crossing any lines?
Well, they need to be really careful about the data they're using to personalize those prices. Avoid anything sensitive, anything that could be used to discriminate.
So no basing prices on someone's race or gender or anything like that? That's a
Yeah.
big no-no.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond those obvious categories. You also need to be careful about things like location data or browsing history. It's all too easy to fall into patterns that could disadvantage certain groups.
Right. So even if it's not intentional, you could end up with a system that's biased.
Exactly. So transparency is crucial here as well. Let customers know how their data is being used to personalize prices and give them the option to opt out if they're not comfortable.
It's all about giving people control over their own data.
Absolutely. And that builds trust. When customers feel like they're in the driver's seat, they're more likely to be open to personalized pricing.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of transparency and control when it comes to dynamic pricing, especially personalized pricing. But what about the practical challenges? Like, is it actually difficult to implement this stuff?
It can be. There are some real hurdles that businesses need to be aware of. One of the biggest ones is finding the right balance between automation and human oversight.
Okay, so it's not just a matter of flipping a switch and letting the AI take over.
No, not at all. AI is great, don't get me wrong, but it's not a silver bullet.
So you still need humans in the loop. Why is that?
Well, for one thing, you need to make sure the algorithms are working as intended. They're not perfect, they can make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes can be costly.
So you need someone there to double check the AI's work, make sure it's not going off the rails.
Exactly. And you also need humans to provide context and judgment. AI is good at crunching numbers and identifying patterns, but it's not so good at understanding the nuances of human behavior.
Right, so you need that human touch to make sure the pricing decisions make sense, not just from a mathematical standpoint, but also from a customer perspective.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between data-driven decision-making and human intuition.
Okay, so it's a balancing act. Got it. What other challenges come to mind?
Another one is the risk of triggering a price war with your competitors. If everyone starts using dynamic pricing to undercut each other, it can lead to a race to the bottom where nobody wins.
So you need to be careful not to get caught in a pricing death spiral.
Exactly. It's about using dynamic pricing strategically, not just reactively. Don't just blindly follow your competitors. Think about your own pricing strategy and how you can use dynamic pricing to achieve your goals.
Right, so it's about being smart and strategic, not just blindly following the herd.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about the importance of maintaining customer trust. We've talked about transparency a lot, but it's worth repeating that if customers feel like they're being manipulated or that prices are constantly fluctuating unfairly, they're going to lose trust in your brand.
Yeah, trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it's hard to get back.
Absolutely. So businesses need to be really mindful of how dynamic pricing is perceived by their customers. They need to think about the long-term implications of their pricing decisions.
So it's not just about short-term gains. It's about building lasting relationships with customers.
Exactly. It's about finding a sustainable approach to dynamic pricing that benefits both the business and the customer.
Well said. I think we've talked a lot about the potential downsides and challenges of dynamic pricing, but let's not forget that it can also be a good thing for consumers.
Oh, absolutely. When implemented thoughtfully and ethically, dynamic pricing can actually enhance the customer experience in a number of ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. How can dynamic pricing benefit consumers?
Well, for one thing, it can lead to lower prices.
Wait, lower prices? I thought dynamic pricing was all about squeezing every last penny out of customers.
Not necessarily. Dynamic pricing allows businesses to adjust prices based on demand. So if demand is low, prices might drop.
So if I'm willing to be a little bit flexible with my timing, I might be able to snag a better deal.
Exactly. Dynamic pricing rewards savvy shoppers who are willing to do their research and wait for the right moment to buy.
That's definitely a plus for consumers. What other benefits are there?
Well, personalized pricing, despite the ethical concerns we discussed earlier, can actually be a positive thing for consumers as well.
Really? How so?
When done right, personalized pricing can lead to a more tailored and relevant shopping experience. Instead of seeing generic prices that may or may not be relevant to you, you might see prices that are specifically tailored to your needs and preferences.
So instead of feeling like I'm being bombarded with irrelevant offers, I might actually see deals that are genuinely appealing to me.
Precisely. Personalized pricing can help businesses connect with customers on a more personal level, which can lead to a more satisfying and enjoyable shopping experience.
I'm starting to see how dynamic pricing, when done right, can be a win-win for both businesses and consumers.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance and creating a system that works for everyone.
Well said. Now, I want to circle back to something we touched on briefly earlier, seasonal trends and dynamic pricing. The article mentions that dynamic pricing is especially effective during certain times of the year. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Think about the holidays, for example. Demand for certain products goes through the roof during the holiday season, and dynamic pricing allows businesses to adjust their prices accordingly.
So basically, if I want to avoid those holiday price hikes, I should probably get my shopping done early.
That's always a good strategy. But it's not just about holidays. Dynamic pricing can also be really effective during clearance sales or end-of-season promotions.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Businesses are trying to get rid of their excess inventory, so they're more likely to offer discounts.
Exactly. And dynamic pricing allows them to adjust those discounts gradually over time so they can find the sweet spot that maximizes their revenue while still moving those products.
So it's a win-win for both the business and the bargain hunter.
Exactly. Dynamic pricing can be a powerful tool for both sides of the equation.
This has all been very interesting, but I have to admit I'm still a bit skeptical about dynamic pricing. It all sounds a bit too good to be true. Are there any guarantees that it will actually work for businesses?
Well, like with any business strategy, there are no guarantees. Dynamic pricing is a tool, and its effectiveness depends on a variety of factors, including how well it's implemented, the specific market conditions, and the overall business strategy.
So it's not a magic bullet that will automatically solve all your pricing problems.
Not at all. It requires careful planning, execution, and ongoing monitoring and adjustment. But for businesses that are willing to put in the effort, dynamic pricing can be a real game changer.
I'm starting to see the potential here, but I'm still wondering, how can businesses know if dynamic pricing is right for them? I mean, is there like a checklist or a set of criteria they can use to make that decision?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer, but there are some key things businesses should consider. First, they need to think about their objectives. What are they hoping to achieve with dynamic pricing? Are they trying to increase revenue, improve margins, optimize inventory, or something else?
So it all goes back to having a clear understanding of your goals.
Exactly. And once you know your goals, you need to think about your target market. Are your customers price sensitive? Are they comfortable with fluctuating prices? How do they typically shop?
Right, because if your customers hate the idea of dynamic pricing, it's probably not going to be a good fit for your business.
Exactly. And finally, you need to consider your competitive landscape. Are your competitors using dynamic pricing? If so, how are they using it? What are their pricing strategies?
So it's all about doing your research and making sure that dynamic pricing makes sense for your specific business and your specific market.
You got it. Dynamic pricing is a powerful tool, but it's not right for everyone. It's important to carefully weigh the pros and cons before you make a decision.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about the future of dynamic pricing. We've already touched on some of the exciting advancements that are on the horizon, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where this is all headed. What's the future of dynamic pricing look like?
Oh man, the future is wide open. I think we're going to see some truly mind-blowing advancements in the coming years. As AI and machine learning continue to evolve, we can expect even more sophisticated algorithms that can predict customer behavior with remarkable accuracy.
So it's going to get even more personalized.
Oh, absolutely. Hyper-personalization is going to be huge. Imagine receiving a price that's tailored not just to your general demographic profile or purchase history, but to your specific needs, preferences, and even your current emotional state.
Whoa, that's next level. How is that even possible?
It's all about data and the incredible power of AI to analyze that data and identify patterns that humans might miss. With the right data, AI can understand us better than we understand ourselves.
That's both exciting and a little bit scary. I mean, it's amazing what technology can do these days, but it also raises some questions about privacy and control.
You're right, those are important considerations. We need to make sure that these advancements are used ethically and
So
responsibly.
it's not just about pushing the boundaries of technology. It's about making sure that technology is used for good.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between innovation and responsibility.
Well said.
Yeah.
What other trends are shaping the future of dynamic pricing?
Well, another one is the rise of real-time feedback loops. This is all about creating a more dynamic and responsive pricing environment where businesses can instantly adjust prices based on real-time market conditions, competitor activity, and even customer behavior.
So it's like having a constant finger on the pulse of the market.
Exactly. With real-time feedback loops, businesses can react quickly to changes in demand, pricing trends, and even external factors like weather or news events.
That's incredibly powerful. How are these real-time feedback loops even possible?
It's all thanks to the incredible advancements we've seen in data analytics, cloud computing, and the Internet of Things. We're now able to collect and analyze massive amounts of data in real time, which allows businesses to make informed pricing decisions on the fly.
So it's like having a constant stream of information flowing in, giving businesses the insights they need to stay ahead of the curve.
Precisely. Real-time feedback loops are transforming the way businesses approach pricing. It's no longer about setting prices and hoping for the best. It's about constantly monitoring, analyzing, and adjusting prices to optimize revenue and stay ahead of the competition.
It sounds like the future of pricing is going to be very, very dynamic.
It definitely is, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
You can't wait to see what the future holds. But I'm also a bit apprehensive about how all of this is going to affect me as a consumer. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a much more complex and unpredictable shopping experience.
In some ways, yes, but it can also be a much more rewarding experience for savvy shoppers who are willing to do their research and be flexible with their purchase timing.
So the key is to be informed and be adaptable.
Exactly. The more you understand about dynamic pricing, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this new pricing landscape effectively and find the best deals.
Well, that's some empowering advice. I'm feeling a lot more confident about the future of shopping now. But I also think it's important to remember that dynamic pricing is just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
That's a very wise observation. It's up to all of us, businesses and consumers alike, to make sure that dynamic pricing is used in a way that benefits everyone.
Well said. Now, before we move on to our next topic,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought about the future of dynamic pricing.
I'm all ears.
It's like, how is this all going to change the way we shop,
Yeah.
in the long run? What's the big picture here?
That's $1 million question, right? It's still early days, but I think it's safe to say that dynamic pricing is going to have a profound impact on the future of retail.
I mean, it already is, right?
Right.
But it seems like it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. As AI and machine learning become even more sophisticated, dynamic pricing is only going to become more prevalent and more impactful.
So what does that mean for us, the shoppers? Should we be excited? Should we be worried?
A little bit of both, I think. I mean, there are definitely some potential downsides to dynamic pricing, like we've discussed. It can be used in ways that feel unfair or manipulative, especially if businesses aren't careful about how they implement it.
Right, so we need to be aware of the potential pitfalls. But what about the positive side? Are there any benefits for consumers in all of this?
Oh, absolutely. When done right, dynamic pricing can actually be a good thing for shoppers. For one thing, it can lead to lower prices, especially for those who are willing to be a bit flexible with their timing.
Okay, so explain that to me. How can dynamic pricing lead to lower prices? I thought it was all about businesses trying to squeeze more money out of us.
Well, it's not always about that. Remember, dynamic pricing is all about responding to changes in supply and demand. So if demand for a product drops, the price might drop too.
So if I'm patient and I'm willing to wait for the right moment, I might be able to snag a sweet deal.
Exactly. Dynamic pricing rewards savvy shoppers who are willing to do their research and be strategic with their purchases.
So it's all about being informed and being patient.
Got it. What other tips do you have for shoppers who want to navigate the world of dynamic pricing effectively?
Well, another important tip is to shop around and compare prices from different retailers. Don't just assume that the first price you see is the best price.
So it's more important than ever to do your homework before you buy anything.
Absolutely. Prices can fluctuate wildly, so it pays to be a savvy shopper and compare your options.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to negotiate. Just because a price is displayed doesn't mean it's set in stone.
Right. It never hurts to ask for a better deal, especially if you're a loyal customer. A lot of businesses are willing to work with you.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is that consumers need to be proactive. Stay informed, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask for what you want. Okay, so we need to be savvy shoppers in this new era of dynamic pricing. But I also think it's important to remember that businesses have a responsibility here too, right? They need to make sure they're using dynamic pricing ethically and transparently.
Couldn't agree more. Businesses need to be upfront with customers about how dynamic pricing works and what factors are influencing those prices. They also need to make sure they're not using dynamic pricing in a way that's discriminatory or unfair.
So it's a two-way street. Businesses need to be responsible and consumers need to be informed.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance and creating a system that works for everyone.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the world of dynamic pricing, its potential benefits and challenges, and the ethical considerations that come of it.
It's been a really thought-provoking conversation. I hope our listeners have learned something new today.
Me too. And I hope this deep dive has inspired everyone to think more critically about the way we shop and the way prices are set in this ever-evolving digital landscape. Thanks for joining me on this journey.
It's been my pleasure. And to all our listeners out there, stay informed, stay savvy, and happy shopping.